All right, that should be coming through for our lovely audience on the YouTube channel at Jewman9885. Beautiful. Now, the bulk of our content tonight will be the Parshat. This is, for those of you unaware, this is the portion of the Torah studied each week. This will include, of course, mainly commentary. That is mostly what study of the Parsha is. This week it is the Parshat Terumah. The Parshat Terumah, it is a lovely little section of Scripture. Terumah means, in rough translation, sort of an elevated gift. It's the word itself appears in the passage. That's the case with lots of Parshat names. The word itself appears, and it's used as the name because it's seen as particularly summative of the whole thing. Our Parshat this week is Exodus 25, the call for contributions. This is where Terumah comes in, the sort of elevated gift, the elevated offering. To put this passage in context, the Jewish people have just left Egypt. The sea has been split. They are wandering in the wilderness now. Moses is leading them, taking them through. It's a beautiful, beautiful, exciting time. Lots of an inference happens in this portion. There's lots that's not included in Exodus that's assumed to happen among these raids by local Canaanite peoples who fall upon the Jews in their hour of greatest vulnerability. But here we are at Exodus 25, 1 through 9, and Moses is at Mount Sinai. Of course, this will be an event you're all familiar with from the Hume curriculum and elsewhere. He's at Mount Sinai. The theophany is being carried out. He is being spoken to by God, and this passage exists in a very, very interesting portion of the wider chronology of the Torah. Generally speaking, the chronology of the Torah is very, very difficult because excuse me. The chronology of the Torah is a very, very difficult thing. There are a few conflicting opinions. This is the portion where it's really debated. For most of it, we can say, oh, this chapter happens at this point, this chapter happens at this point. They exist in that order. But that is not remotely agreed upon in the latter half of Exodus specifically. This passage is especially sort of vulnerable to that because how the theophany is expressed is very complicated. God tells Moses a lot of things on the mountain, and in some of them he will explain the foundational concept of the thing, and some interpreters will say, then we get the story of what happens when that's implemented, and that is the whole complexity of the scenario. It is a matter of debate. The sort of Orthodox Hasidic opinion is that it is completely linear, but we'll get into exactly what all of that means. If we open Sefaria here, Sefaria, it's a Jewish sort of Bible website. I'm sure you're familiar with its Christian equivalents. We're great fans of Sefaria. Anybody who watches the channel will know we are great fans of Sefaria. And this is our revised JPS translation, a very, very good translation. And we begin at Exodus 25:1. God spoke to Moses, saying, "Tell the Israelite people to bring me gifts. You shall accept gifts from me from every person whose heart is so moved." Now, this is a very important. This is the pivotal portion of the whole thing, because the word terumah appears here, and it doesn't. As with many things, as with analysis of the Torah in general, the details are all in the Hebrew, and Hebrew is this very sophisticated poetic language with layers to it. So it's very, very difficult to say, to discern in the English what exactly is being said. In this passage, verse 2, tell the Israelite people to bring me gifts. This is the wording of gifts is very important here. It's more the English word gifts is sort of more casual, but in the Hebrew, again, it uses the word terumah, which I rolled my R there like a moron. But the terumah is this more holy kind of gift. The idea being that you perform terumah, its root word is to lift up or to elevate. You perform terumah as a sanctification, as sort of an atonement, and God is very particular with his wording with terumah here when he says that this is voluntary. He says these are gifts. God is trying to he's trying to populate the tabernacle, the portable temple, and the tabernacle. This is also when the creation of the Ark of the Covenant happens. But what we are reading here, this whole portion, the actual gifting being performed is the gifting of valuable things for the tabernacle. The Jews have had no direct sort of connection to God beyond Moses, and Moses has been a little ornery in these past few passages, and he's been denying God's specific will and mishandling all the power that he's been delegated by God. So there is some serious interest in having a designated space through which the Jews can interact with God. Greater importance, again, depending on the chronology, but we'll get there when we get there. We have a few important commentaries on 25:2. Firstly, we have Rashi. Rashi is the go-to commentator for really any portion of the Torah, though if I remember correctly, his range is a little narrow. It is specifically the Torah, and the Torah is, of course, only a portion of what in the Christian world is called the Old Testament. Rashi is an early medieval French rabbi, a French commentator, and Rashi is sort of the surface level, generally the surface level of analysis for any passage of the Torah. Sometimes Rashi has some crazy opinion, but he's a medieval rabbi; it's to be expected. And Rashi has this to say. Rashi begins again very, very simply. And that simplicity does carry some connotations. There's in some Passover traditions, there's a practice where you will imitate a very smart young boy, a very average young boy, and a really belligerent, stupid young boy, and you do have this little play, and the really smart young boy is discerned by asking this really smart rabbinic question, and the really average young boy asks a perfectly reasonable rabbinic question, and the really stupid young boy asks a stupid question, and the rabbi who invented this tradition goes out of the way to say he asked a stupid question and you should shame him for that and take his privileges. It's very funny. Rashi here is coming through for all us stupid young boys and says questions why God says, take for me, why God is asking, in our translation, it doesn't say that explicitly, but why God is asking for a levy of goods as a gift. Why can God not just say, well, I created it, it's mine, hand it over? Why is God not levying like a tithe? And it is Rashi's opinion here that this is because this is part of sort of the social contract that God establishes between God and man, that God is respecting some level of private property and ownership in the society of the Israelites here, and so he is choosing to delegate the ownership of all of these items down to them. And if we look a little forward here, and altogether, God seems to be on the right track because the Israelites give in massive amounts. This is this enormous wave of charity, and they all donate this tremendous quantity of wealth and rare goods and what have you that they've acquired. Somehow, this is another point where the history struggles to line up with the text because the Israelites have only been migrating for a short while, but one way or another they have all of this wealth. And while on the one hand God does promise, he says when you leave Egypt you will leave Egypt with great wealth, in material terms they don't really. The Israelites are not like looting palaces or anything as they leave Egypt. So one way or another they have enough sort of personal wealth to themselves, maybe that there's some greater amount of ownership afforded in their in the slave configuration of Egypt, but they gift in droves, and the gifting is meant to be this very ordered process, and different social classes give different amounts, or at least the whole class is expected to contribute a certain amount. But that is upended when they begin with the poor and they escalate to the wealthiest, finest families. But then when they begin with the poor people even are so giving that when they arrive finally at the wealthy families can hardly give anything. They end up giving the jewels for the symbolic breastplate of the high priest. This is important because it distinguishes the high priest. This is the first early distinction of the high priest. We don't have the clan of Levi established that has all of the priesthood as its descendants, but the idea has been set. The idea has been fixed, and the priest, of course, is component to the tabernacle and eventually to the temple, so it's vital that he's established at this point. So that's Rambam's opinion, that that was Rashi's opinion. Now we're moving on to Rambam's opinion, another great Jewish philosopher, theologian, not to be confused with Rambam. There's an M and an N distinction at the end. Ramban offers the following, that the secret of the tabernacle is that the glory which dwelt upon Mount Sinai should dwell upon it in a concealed manner. He waffles on a little more. It can be very, very difficult to really parse these commentaries, and now in the modern day, Jewish commentary is sort of an interpretive commentary on an interpretive commentary on this age-old holy text that nobody can really make sense of. So it's a bit of a game of telephone. But what Ramban is getting at, in a broad sense, is that Mount Sinai is inherently special. The mountain is inherently this point of revelation, of divinity, and the Jewish people are in a bit of a pickle because they need to be migrating to the Holy Land and, of course, performing all that has been laid out before them, that God has promised them, but they can't bring the mountain with them. And so it is Ramban's opinion that the vitality of the tabernacle is not just in having a place of worship, and that's nice in itself, but in being able to bring the mountain with them. That they cannot have Moses forever, and they cannot have Moses on the mountain forever, but they can have the tabernacle for more or less forever. And the tabernacle and the high priest are these stand-ins for Moses and Mount Sinai. The idea being that in the future we can perform infinite Sinais with the tabernacle. That is the ideal. And this, and now we start to get into the chronology of the thing. We start to get into the ordering of the situation. This commentary lands firmly on the side that the Torah is told in the order its events happen, more or less. Again, history and the text diverge pretty sharply, but within under an understanding, an assumption, for the sake of the discussion, that all events in the Torah happened as described. This is the difference of opinion. Ramban is very confident that the Mishkan instructions, the instructions for the tabernacle, come immediately after the covenant at Sinai. And this connects to his argument that it is a portable Sinai. And that's one side of the opinion, and we'll read another opinion on that part. Rabbi Ibn Ezra argues on sort of a narrative logic. Ibn Ezra is part of a more conservative, what we would now perceive as Hasidic field of sort of point of view on the Torah that is very, very literal. And the distinctive part of that is that when a Jewish group takes the Torah very literally, it is not only at its word, but it takes very, very literally any kind of exotic commentary it makes in line with that. Hasidism interprets that in such a way that it believes the entire Torah was given at Mount Sinai and sort of wrote itself as time went on and as the events in it happened. There is another opinion that, within Hasidism. There's another thought that the Torah has existed literally forever. There is a linguistic little tag. If you've watched my YouTube video, you'll be familiar. There's a little twist of the wording that could imply that the creation of the world was a group effort. You may be familiar with this in the Hume literature, that it's this sort of vestige of polytheism. In Hasidism, it's thought that the other party present at the creation of everything is the Torah. And a previous part of the chapter is interpreted to mean that God used the Word to create the world, the Word being the Torah. God used the Torah to create the world. It's that on its own is a whole very interesting subject of Jewish thought. The idea of creative language, the idea of the Hebrew language, and more specifically the Torah, but the Hebrew language at large as well, being this creative force. You may be most familiar with this in the golem myth, that golems were originally a piece of Jewish folklore in which a rabbi seeking to protect his Prague neighborhood from persecution creates a giant creature of clay, and he brings it to life by writing the Hebrew word for truth on its forehead, and he puts it to sleep by erasing one of the Hebrew characters, and then when you do that, it creates the Hebrew word for death. But that's the predicament of the whole thing. And so the Hebrew language is perceived as this creative force, and so Hasidism takes the linearity of the Torah very seriously, because if the Torah is so objective that it literally created the world, and the world is molded according to the words that appear in the Torah, then it should ideally be told in a clear chronological order. Now, though, we have some diverging opinion. Firstly, with Rabbi Sforno. Rabbi Sforno is an Italian rabbi in the Italian Renaissance. So he's in line with other Italian rabbis, and during the Renaissance especially, he's this very kind of controversial, forward-thinking theologian. And when he reads this passage, this is his interpretation, that it is not linear. He says after they sinned with the calf, because at this point, when we are hearing about the tabernacle and how we are to build it and all the gifting to go into the tabernacle, Sforno says it all happens, before the golden calf event. The golden calf event, it is this sort of breaking of a covenant between the Jewish people and God. The theophany is happening. God is speaking to Moses. Moses comes down from the mountain. He sees that the people have created an idol. They've melted down all of their wealth and created this animal, this calf, to worship, because Moses has been gone for so long that so they figure God is not helping them and they should just move on. Though that's only one interpretation. Again, if you've watched my video, you'll be familiar with another interpretation that I'm very, very partial to, which is that the idol in the golden calf event is not actually a pagan god. It's not some invented god that the Jews come up with. The idol of the golden calf is actually God. That they have created this golden calf not to diverge from God, but because they don't have Moses as their object and their conduit of worship. And so they say, well, we need something new to sort of keep the people's attention. And they choose the calf because cattle are this sort of stereotypical symbol of divinity in Canaan. And so they figure, well, we are representing God like any other society would represent their God, and we're still only worshiping the one, so they think the golden calf is okay. Of course, Moses comes down from the mountain, and it's really not okay. And many great and terrible things befall the Jewish people in line with their creation of the golden calf. And per this interpretation that it was representing God, the whole thing is just about God's particularity and not being portrayed. And that, again, is its whole different discussion. It's an issue, in fact, an interpretive issue in several religions, not just Judaism. But God is very particular about not at least being portrayed as another Canaanite god. He wants to be something distinct and something special, and if he will be portrayed, it will be on his own terms, by his own instructions. And Sforno believes, well, this can't be right. That the golden calf happening afterward has a few narrative inconsistencies. Firstly, that apparently everybody gave all of their wealth to build the tabernacle, but then all of a sudden they have tons and tons of wealth to make this giant statue of a golden calf. And that's great and all. But he says, well, that doesn't make sense. And also, the tabernacle is a conduit of worship, fundamentally. That it is this place, and it has this object in it, the Ark of the Covenant, that, by all accounts, is this conduit of worship, is sort of this idol in the Ark of the Covenant, as we'll get to, has some figures on it that would make it sort of an idol in some analysis and interpretation of it. History-based analytical interpretation of the Torah, but that's just me. But I really like Sforno's take here that the golden calf is a sinful conduit. It is created without God's permission, and it equates God, sort of condescends God, to be like the rest of these Canaanite deities that he is so particularly against, and that the making up for the forgiveness, the atonement for building the golden calf is in making a divinely ordained conduit of worship, is the idea that that now that it's being made on God's terms, that is how we're making up for the whole thing. And perhaps it's a bit of a compromise. It could be seen on God's part. This is outside of Sforno's commentary. This is my own thoughts. But it could be seen as this sort of compromise. Certainly, that's not unheard of. I know in our mostly Christian cultural tradition, it's a great inclination just in our American society to assume that God is completely infallible. And there are many interpretations, and some in Judaism, that agree with that. But it is a more general Jewish opinion that God can be sort of argued with, and his mind can be changed. Moses does this several times. Some other figures do this when they have an especially intimate connection with God. But the terrific thing with that in general, with that whole idea of wrestling with God, is that we can have these moments and these arguments for ideas where God's mind was changed or he is making a concession. Personally, I think, at least and I'm sure a rabbi who's gone and gotten his rabbinical degree will have some complete categorical way of dismantling my argument here, but I sort of see the tabernacle as a compromise. God has seen that the people need a conduit, and there are the very popular kind of website little weekly spiritual thought commentaries that will say, "Oh, this is all about kind of the slave mentality of the Israelites at this point," and maybe there's some truth to that with some of how they act. But I'm inclined to view the Israelites as more modern in their mindset here, and not necessarily more modern, but more relatable. And so what I think is that the tabernacle happens after the Mishkan, happens after the calf, and that it is God's compromise. God sees that they need a conduit that we human beings cannot, or the Israelites in this situation cannot hold on to just this abstract idea of God. That's a very, very difficult thing to believe in. Certainly, I think many of us today would agree that abstract concept is hard to grip onto. And so God says, well, all right, if you need a conduit for worship, I can give you a conduit. And part of that agreement is sort of, firstly, that it will not be the singular idol. There's sort of the Ark of the Covenant there, but the Ark of the Covenant is a vessel for the Word, and whether or not the Torah has been around forever, the Word is very, very important. So God says, well, I'll make this compromise. It's not a single figure, it's not a single idol, but there is a route through which you can worship me. There is something physical you can concentrate your worship into. And he says, well, Moses will not be around forever, but I will ordain a high priest so that you can have a person who is the mediator, who performs this portable Sinai, as Ramban puts it. And so that is his compromise. That is his seeing that human nature exists within these bounds, and his agreeing to those terms. Just one moment here. I have here a beverage. I will open it an appropriate distance from the microphone to not damage anything. Beautiful. Hopefully that can get me through the rest of it. But in this case, there is sort of the moral lesson and the debate over the moral lesson, what the moral lesson is supposed to be, and then there's the more elaborate stuff about the timeline and the chronology of the story. And that's great, and that's wonderful, and that's beautiful. But in terms of the moral analysis of it, which I won't harp too much on, but it's still an important part of the passage, and we should understand it, is the nature of voluntary giving. The idea of terumah, of this gift, that God is asking not for a tithe, but for a gift, and the people give. And there's lots and lots of discussion about that as well. For example, God says that things should be gifted to the tabernacle for he whose heart moves him. But there's a paradox here. It's a divine command, so ideally we should be hanging on every word that God says. The Israelites think, and Rashi thinks, but it's voluntary. So then, how do you resolve that? What Rashi thinks is, again, very surface level. He just says, we can't even consider this a command. He says we have to be more complex in our understanding of what a word from God can mean, and that it can not only be a command, it often is a command, but it's not only a command, and it can also be just a request. And it's, of course, we have many stories of people treating commands as requests and then getting eaten by big fish for it. But the operative part here is that God is requesting. Certainly we don't see him punish anybody for not giving, though it's tough to say with this sample of people who are so enthusiastic to give. But that is Rashi's belief, that we have to understand God more within a more sophisticated lens. Ramban expounds on this. The meaning is, you shall not compel anyone, but rather you shall take from those who are willing, and this is the way of all voluntary offerings, nedavot, Hebrew voluntary offering, that they are given with a generous heart and a willing spirit. Rabbi Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin in the 19th century, in his Chamek Devar, comments that it's a principle about religious authenticity. This teaches, I'm quoting him, this teaches that service of God requires two elements, external command and internal desire. Command alone produces mere compliance without love. Spontaneous desire alone creates chaos without structure. The ideal is commanded spontaneity, where the heart embraces what the law requires. So he is arguing that God has asked a favor here, and everybody can comply, but that it is this sort of test of their compulsion, that they're being given an option, but it is they are presenting perhaps their atonement for the golden calf, but in any case they are presenting their renewed devotion to God by voluntarily giving. I think there's a lot of this that sort of spiritually carries on, not only in Judaism, in fact, maybe even slightly less in Judaism compared to other Abrahamic faiths, is the idea that you have these very, very hard obligations, even if they're not really obligations, at least by the law, so to speak. Now, the items that are gifted are also very specific. We have a list here. The Torah is a great fan of lists. We perceive it as this mostly narrative document, but every once in a while we will give you a very, very comprehensive list on a series of goods, or especially family lineages. And its spin-off documents lean into this more or less. The New Testament leans mostly narrative. The really niche, sort of off in the weed stuff that most Christians, or perhaps there's a Muslim equivalent, but most Christians would not consider canon, like the Book of Mormon, they will lean into the really listy stuff, at least so I understand. And here we have our list, and quoting again, this is the JPS New Translation, and these are the gifts that you shall accept from them: gold, silver, and copper, blue, purple, and crimson yarns, fine linen, goat's hair, tanned ram skins, dolphin skins, and acacia wood, oil for lighting, spices for the anointing oil and for the aromatic incense, lapis lazuli and other stones for setting, for the ephod, and for the breastpiece. So we see, like I mentioned, it is the wealthy donors who hand over the stones for the breastpiece. This is certainly it's a great act of giving. These are valuable stones, but it's still less than would be their station, because they were to be giving last, and the rest of it just gets donated by the generosity of the rest of the people. So we have here our little Minecraft shopping list, and Rashi, of course, in his mission to bear all the Passover stupid children on his back, explains these were needed for the Mishkan. They're explained where they go and what they do, and Rashi sort of puts it aside, but he's Rashi, so he has to make some general surface level comment on just about every verse. Shemot Rabbah, the Shemot Rabbah offers a more allegorical reading, quoting him, "Gold, this corresponds to the wealthy of Israel who contributed generously. Silver, the silver was for the sockets, and it says, and the 100 talents of silver, and this came from the half shekel that everyone gave equally, rich and poor alike. Copper, this came from the mirrors of the women who assembled at the entrance of the tent of meeting." Shemot Rabbah is doing, he's doing several sort of tropish lenses of analysis in Torah study, where, firstly, he is reading very, very hard into material culture. This is this is a popular thing that you'll see. The items and the components of some greater project be given special meaning. When with challah bread, which I will point out has been in the cafeteria the last few days, or at least is in the cafeteria on Fridays. I've got someone else with me in the studio. Do you know if it's just Fridays when they have challah by the salad bar? Yeah, I know it's at least on Fridays. I don't know if they have it the rest of the week. And they also don't know how to price it because it doesn't have a tag anywhere. But anyway, when you're making challah, there is this there is a material culture interpretation where every ingredient is an allegory, and the honey is the sweetness of our devotion to God, or what have you. I forget the particulars of challah specifically. It's delicious, and I do make it, but I'm a little skeptical of its supposed ingredient breakdowns. And then Ramban, we have Ramban again on 25.3, again talking about our little shopping list. He believes that he sees sort of a durability and a lastingness in the materials. This is quoting him, quoting Ramban. He commanded them to bring materials that would last, not things that would rot or decay, because this was to be an eternal structure for the generations. Ramban says this, the tabernacle is actually meant to be a very, very temporary structure. What Ramban is referring to is all of the hard items inside that get transferred to Solomon's temple and then the second temple. So is the idea that there is a permanent component to the tabernacle, even if it is a tool of migration. Materials that would last, he says, because this was to be an eternal structure. Therefore, gold and silver, which do not rust, copper, which is strong, dyes that hold their color. I think he's maybe a little further off the mark on that. A long-standing pattern of Jewish commentators that they will just kind of, the whole thing is sort of a trust me, bro. But they will do this with little particular details. Among them, him saying dyes that hold their color. It's biodegradable material, but sure. Acacia wood, which does not decay. I'm pretty sure acacia wood decays. Well, it decays at some point. And anyway, he's making a point that mostly holds, that there are material items in the tabernacle that are meant to have longevity, because God is demonstrating, sort of a wider longevity of his personage and the worship of him. Then, in a rare moment, well, not rare necessarily, but like a 50-50 moment of historical agreement between the Torah and archaeology, all of the items asked for here are very, very period appropriate to the time. They have, obviously you have gold and silver, and that's been valuable everywhere, whenever, but it gives the example of blue dye, which comes from murex snails, which is extremely valuable. You only get it from a single lake that's now in Israel, and that's why, even though it's not ordained, it's not a Hajj, many Jews go to Israel because you receive their tassels for your talit, your prayer shawl, that have been done in techelet, in this special blue dye from this very, very rare snail. And that's a great personal achievement and a symbol of devotion. And then the acacia wood is very interesting. This is a point I, in Gilgamesh, harped on in my Hume lecture, that there are very few sources of wood in the Middle East, and they're very, very valuable. And so just the having of wood physically is a symbol of wealth. Like I mentioned in Gilgamesh, this is to do with Lebanon. Gilgamesh explores the forests of Lebanon, and the wood there is all very valuable. In this case, it's acacia, which is native to the Sinai Peninsula. Again, one of the rare pockets of wood in the Middle East, and so the having of this wood is very, very valuable. And that's why it does decay, unlike what Ramban said, but it is still this special symbol of value because it's this rare natural item that's rare in an exciting different way. And then they're also given tachash skins. They're skins of an animal. We're not totally sure which animal. It could be a dolphin, it could be a dugong. What on earth is a dugong? You know what a dugong is? It's apparently an animal. Dugong. Marine mammal. Oh, it's a manatee. It's one. Excuse me, it's not a manatee. I'm going to get killed by someone for saying that. But it is related to manatees. It looks a lot like them. Okay, so it's assumed to be some aquatic mammal. And, of course, the Hasids, their contribution is to say, well, maybe it's some extinct, exciting animal that we don't know about. And we all collectively go, you go, buddy. No disrespect whatsoever. Our wonderful Chabad rabbis are of a spin-off of the Hasidic movement. However, I don't know. It's some of their thoughts on the chronology of the Torah are a little far-fetched, just in my mind, personally. Then in Exodus 25:8, let them make me a sanctuary, and I will dwell among them. This is the theological heart of the Parsha, so to speak. And it's been broken down with some detail. Rashi says, Rashi points out a grammatical oddity, and they shall make for my name a holy place. But and he points out, in the Hebrew, there's a grammatical oddity. In the English, it sounds sort of Toranically obscure in a way that the whole rest of the Torah sounds. But in the Hebrew, there is a little funny little thing. There's a bit of repetition, and it's abnormal. Unfortunately, I can't give the most detailed Hebrew breakdown. I don't speak it tragically, and hopefully something I can fix. But the great question of the passage: why does God need a house? Why does God need a point on earth that He exists? We've talked about this some. Ramban argues the community needs a visible center where God's presence is manifest. That's my opinion. With sort of this idea of God meeting the people in the middle. And on the individual level, the sanctuary's true location, and here we get our sort of ending platitude. The real temple was inside us all along. The sanctuary's true location is within each person. And he says, well, it says among them, and among them could be interpreted sort of that way. That's another very common pattern is sort of this dual meaning in Hebrew that the commentators jump on, and they make lots of exciting and sometimes well-supported assumptions based off of that Turanic doublespeak. And there are lots and lots of other breakdowns of that very, very small grammatical point, most of them converging on this kind of popular how does this affect me now idea that you should be building a tabernacle within yourself to commune with God and whatnot. I won't harp too much on that. It is a big part of the analysis, but it's know your audience. Now we get again into more of my comfort zone with the history and the particularities of the thing and the and what qualifies as an idol, with the particularly with the tabernacle as a whole, because it's this very lavish place of worship. There's an argument: should places of worship be lavish? This is an argument that persists to this day, and so you have competing opinions and competing synagogue construction. That's where it makes itself manifest, that you will have some synagogues that are very simple because the worship place of God should be very simple, and some that are very elaborate. The other great argument is with the Ark of the Covenant. The Rashi has an interesting thought about Ark of the Covenant that has been agreed upon, apparently, between a lot of groups. He has this very kind of Indiana Jones interpretation that he interprets some of the wording of it as meaning, the cherubs, the little angel figures on top of it, point towards each other when the Israelites are on the right track, so to speak, and point away from each other when they've turned away from God. So that does add some sort of animation to them, which, apart from being very exciting in the period, an inanimate object moving per that, it also creates a big problem regarding worship of idols, because if the Holy of Holies, the holiest room in the tabernacle that only the high priest enters under prescribed circumstances, if the Holy of Holies, ideally the highest, most valuable place of worship, contains the Ark of the Covenant, which has these animated, not God, angel figures on it, is that idol worship? Is when the high priest goes in there and performs his rituals, is it idol worship for not only for the cherubs to be there, but for there to be animation in the cherubs? The whole point of a good deal of the Torah is saying idols have no power. When Avraham is a young boy, his father is a craftsman who makes God, like, religious fetish objects. And Avraham at one point is put in charge of the store. I really can't imagine why, because he ends up obliterating their entire stock with a hammer. Because a man comes in and says, "Well, I need an idol. I need a cultic fetish for this particular subject." And Avraham says, "Well, how's this fetish going to help you? How's this little statue going to help you? It's inanimate." And he says, "Well, there's a God behind that." And he says, "Well, if there's a God behind that, he should stop me from breaking it with a hammer." And then he breaks it with a hammer, and he doesn't get stopped. So that's the sort of the controversy of it. And there are a few conflicting opinions on this. The conclusion, though, is that it's okay because of the Ark of the Covenant being a vessel for the Word. That we can have sort of the set dressing for it, but ultimately the only physical object that is being used as the final layer of the whole conduit, that is the tabernacle, are the plates with the law on them. And so ultimately we're worshiping the law. We're not worshiping, not we now, because the Jewish faith doesn't operate that way, but the Israelites are not worshiping an idol. They're not worshiping a representation of God. They're worshiping this kind of component of his special power. All very fun, all very exciting. Give me just one moment. Very good, very good. Moving on. We get lots of measurements. We get lots of dimensions. This is not only a wider sort of spiritual opinion or spiritual passage, but it's also very prescriptive, and it's all about the actual manufacture of the tabernacle. There is also great debate over the cherubim of the ark, whether they have baby faces or are winged bird people. And the general opinion seems to lean toward winged bird people. Very important. Now if we forge on, we have some Kabbalistic interpretations. Kabbalah. This will be a staple on the show. Kabbalah is you'll hear it called Jewish mysticism. If Rabbi Dolfer Yehuda are around, you'll hear them call it Jewish mysticism. It's I think it's more like a theological lens of interpretation. Effectively, it is a view of the Torah in which a lot of interpretive assumptions are made very early on that change how you view it. It has this very unifying collective idea of God. The maybe its most famous, well, it has a few very famous parts, but one of its vital components is that God is sort of this collective oneness of all creation, that everybody and everything has this little bit of divinity in it, and there's sort of this gradual unification of that divinity and being in touch with God, with the world and nature as being in touch with God. It's like I said, it relies on sort of a different set of assumptions, and that's what distinguishes it, and it gets called mysticism, firstly because there is a branch of it that was actual just wizardry in the 1600s-ish. And there's a very funny anecdote where a rabbi who is practicing wizard Kabbalah is taken to a witchcraft court in Italy, and they accuse him by the law of performing dark magic, and he says, no, I'm not performing dark magic. And they say, well, you've done magic, and he says, yes, I've done light magic. And he gives them a rabbinic argument about the distinction between dark magic, which is prohibited in Judaism as well, but the Jews have never really cared. There was no great witchcraft crisis in Judaism, and then the supposedly light magic that is Kabbalah, and the idea is that you can only really perform it if you are of great moral standing with God, and then you sort of have access to this delegated divine power. And he was acquitted. It was a good enough rabbinic argument that a Christian witchcraft court let him go free. Kabbalah's thoughts are on the two cherubim. They correspond, so Kabbalah thinks, to the two names of God, which will not be said here, to conform to Jewish standard with the highest and holiest name of God, the Tetragrammaton. I'm not saying it out loud or writing it digitally, so on. It has a lot of sort of interpretive thought over the wings being spread over the ark, representing something in the integration of these divine attributes. When they face each other, it indicates that mercy and judgment are in harmony. When they turn away, it indicates divine displeasure. Building on